one of the biggest ones is the so what test. If I were a stranger, I find your profile or your content, I would literally scroll past it so fast because I would be like, so what? So what? What does this mean for me? Nothing. And I would just scroll right past. So that's a big one. That's, I think, a huge head smack moment.
Welcome to the Headsmack Podcast, where we have candid conversations with misfits and mavericks. Those not afraid to stand up and stand out. The dreamers and the doers, the ones who've stumbled, fumbled, and then soared. Here we delve into the inspiring journeys and pivotal aha moments that have shaped their worlds. And maybe through sharing their adventures, you'll get hit with a head smack that'll change your destiny. Hey, welcome to the Headsmack Podcast. My name is Povolni, and I am excited to have Rachel Pedersen with me. Today, Rachel is a USA Today bestselling author, sought-after speaker, founder of high-level consulting agency called Pelanora, a high-level consulting agency, and is also a trailblazer in the field of social media marketing. Rachel has partnered with entrepreneurs, Fortune 500 companies, and industry leaders to create transformative campaigns. Her accolades include global media coverage, speaking engagements at prestigious events, and groundbreaking results such as scaling businesses to multi-figure revenue growth. Rachel, so excited to have you on. Welcome.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. This will be great.
I'm excited to talk to you because I've been following along with your journey and your adventures for a few years. And so I was looking forward to chatting with you and learning a little bit more about you. I'm impressed with what you're doing. You're doing some amazing things, helping a lot of people. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what you're doing now. But before we get started, I want to hear your origin story. I like starting off by hearing people's origin story. So you can go as far back as you want to go, and I'd like to hear a little bit about that. What was the formation of Rachel Pedersen?
Oh gosh. Okay, so growing up, I grew up in a super religious household. So my dad was a pastor and my mom was the worship leader of our church. And so growing up, like I was pretty, I don't want to say trained, but I feel like trained is the right word here. I was trained to be on stages and present and speak publicly. And so I kind of feel like that was a huge part of how I became who I am. And as I got older, so I don't know about you, but I kind of had like a rebellious, like naughty
Yeah,
attitude with life.
yeah.
Yeah. I was like,
I think we all do
so
in
here are all the
some.
things you're right. Yeah. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. So, surprise, surprise, I became a single mom at 21 and just life kind of changed a little bit at that point. I think one of the things that was the most surprising is like my dad was struggling financially to even like pay his bills. At that point, like he could barely even like afford his rent or mortgage rather. And my mom wasn't willing at that point to let me live with her. So I kind of had to figure some things out. So I, gosh, it's so weird to go back to that point. I hustled and I grinded and I found this thing called, do you remember by chance Cha-Cha? Like you text
Cha-cha.
242 242.
No,
Do you
that
remember
might have been an
Cha-Cha?
American
Like,
thing. No.
okay. So it was, you would text 242 242 and any question you asked, a guide would send you an answer.
Oh,
So
wow.
I did that nonstop. I answered thousands and thousands of questions, and you would get paid anywhere from 8 cents to 24 cents per question. And they had to have like citations and everything. And I mean, at that point in time, so like I'm struggling. I'm barely making ends meet. And I was making anywhere from 1,800 to maybe 2,700 a month just
Oh,
working
wow.
on my computer. And that was a huge deal, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the
wow.
difference
Yeah.
between diapers and no diapers. Yeah.
Right.
So I became one of the top hotshot guides. And I will say, like, I think that time was really, really crucial for me to learn how to search for the answers to anything. Like, you
Yeah.
can find answers to absolutely anything if you're resourceful, if you're willing
Right.
to search a little bit.
Right. Right.
So I did that for for a very short time, but it was a few months. And um, it was in 2014. I was working as a hairstylist and I met my amazing husband and we fell in love pretty dang fast. I'm not gonna lie. Like
Yeah.
we met and we got married 13 days later. It was like,
Wow.
let's go. Let's just make life happen. And from there, I just I started like building this business on the side, working as a marketing consultant for $14 an hour, and just continuing to build and pursuing like how can I make this something. I
Right.
don't have
Right.
a degree, I don't have qualifications, but I just feel like I could make this something. Back then, actually, this is kind of interesting. I don't normally share this. So we would cruise, me and Paul, we would just
Hmm.
cruise driving in the car, listening to the song Fast Car by Tracy Chapman,
Yeah.
and imagine like we could do something. We could be someone. We could make something happen,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I did. And so
Where did that
it
come
took me
from?
about
Where did that feeling come from? Where did that desire, where did that inspiration come from?
that's so interesting because I don't feel like there was you're gonna make me cry, Paul. Dig on it. I don't feel like there was anything in my life up until that point that had ever indicated that something else was possible. I only knew like poverty. I only knew like addiction. I only knew families broken by divorce and abuse and prison and tragedy. And so I honestly don't know. I feel like sometimes like if you meet the right person, whether it's like a business partner or a strategic like team member or a spouse, you just meet them and like hope is sparked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's definitely what it was for me with Paul. Like I met him and I was like life can look different,
Right. Well, and I
even
think
though there was
sometimes that
nothing to
unconditional,
indicate that that was possible.
yeah, I think sometimes unconditional love does that. I think it's very transformative when you
Mhm.
experience that,
Yeah.
especially if you haven't experienced it before. And so that
Yes.
gives you the hope. That gives you like I'm valued,
Yeah.
I'm loved, I'm somebody thinks I'm the world. And I think that could make a huge
Yeah.
impact on just building that hope that there's more
Yeah.
to what I can do. Yeah.
And it's wild too, because I was just talking with Paul about this the other day. And, I had maybe 6 or 7 boyfriends and or fiancés before Paul that were extremely wealthy, like really wealthy, like families own hospitals. Father is institutional, like legacy for neurosurgery. Like I had some really wealthy boyfriends
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I said no to all of them. And then I met him and I was like, this feels like something that could be the start of something amazing.
Yeah.
And oh, yeah, you're gonna make me cry. There's something about Paul's, isn't there? Like
Yeah. That's my
Pauls
wife
are
says
great
that.
people. Yes. They're underrated. So I started building and it took me, let's see, so we married in 2013. And then by 2015, I had started the business. 2016, I went full time. 2016, still, I retired him, uh, got him home from his 9 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, yeah, the rest is kind of history. So crazy
So
origin
this
story.
business that you started, where did you learn the stuff that you
Mhm.
learned? You mentioned that you did the hairdressing. You mentioned that you did
Yeah.
the what was it, cha-cha? Was that the name of it? Cha-cha? Do I
Yeah. Cha
remember
Cha Guide.
it? So where did the evolution to from doing those things to what you started doing in 2015 once that hope came? Where did that come from?
It was yeah, it doesn't seem like a natural progression at all. It was kind of accidental. So I had a client that was sitting in my chair and I was giving her like the best highlights of her life. And she
Yeah,
was like,
yeah,
we were just talking about all kinds of things. We were talking about like Shark Tank. And I was talking about how I grew my business as a hairstylist. And I was like, well, basically, I just post these before and after pictures on social, and my clientele grows the more that I do that.
yeah.
And she was like, would you be willing to like consult for us? And part of me was like, Absolutely not. I'm so not qualified for this."
Yeah,
But she
yeah.
was like, "No, I want you to consult for us. We need help with marketing." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I'll do it." She's like, "How does
Wow.
$14 an hour sound?" I was like, "That's amazing side cash. Yes, please." So it was accidental, and then
Yeah,
it kind of fit. So I was like, "Let's do it," you know?
yeah, yeah. So at what point did you think that this is gonna work and I could do this kind of thing forever instead of doing the hairstyling?
Mm. I still am learning that. No, I'm just kidding. The first night, so I went out to dinner with her and her husband who owned this like fast food franchise. And when I came home, I presented it all to Paul. And I will never forget that moment. Like I laid everything out on the kitchen table and I was like, they want to hire me as a marketing consultant. Like, what do you think? And he said, I think this is your future.
Wow.
And how many times can you cry on a Thursday, right? I was pretty blown away because I don't think I even believed in me at that point. But he
Yeah.
was like, no, this is it. This is what you're meant to do. And I was like, okay, I'll do it.
Wow.
Um, but it took me a lot longer to realize, like, no, this is for real. I would actually say it was probably over the last like 2 years that I've been re-choosing this field, if that makes sense. Kind of being like, okay, so I've had all the technical success, like checked all the boxes, hit all the milestones, everything that
Yeah,
people
yeah.
want.
Got the
Um,
commas and all that.
do I, yeah, do I actually choose this? And it was this last year that I was like, yeah, I'm gonna re-choose this. Let's do this another decade or
Yeah,
so, you know?
yeah. Well, and I'm
Yeah.
guessing that your husband
Hmm.
probably saw the light in your eyes or the bounce in your step when you did what you did, and
Hmm.
I'm guessing that's probably why he said, "You're made for this, like, you need to go in on this,"
Yeah.
because he saw something probably
Hmm.
light up in you, right?
I would think so. But I will say, so just yesterday morning, oh, I was so sick yesterday and I randomly took a photo just in my cute sick outfit and I was like, "Babe, I think I should be a photographer. Look at my great angles. Like I'm so good at this." And he sent back like the sweetest message ever and he was like, "Baby, you can do anything that you set your mind to. Like you have so many skills and so much talent." And I was like, gosh dang, this man is like one in a bajillion. Mhm.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, and finding somebody to
Mhm.
encourage you, and somebody that, I mean,
Yeah.
encouragement is so valuable. Like, I think the world needs more
Mhm.
encouragers. Um,
Yeah.
you'd mentioned your faith and growing up in church and stuff, and even like the Apostle Paul talked about those who would come and encourage him. And he talked about
Mhm.
God who encourages those who need encouragement. And I think encouragers are such a critical thing, and I think we all need those in our lives. And when we're
Mhm.
married to one, that's amazing. But I think all of us just need that one person that can just say, "Hey, you've got this," or "You can do this," or whatever you set your heart to, you can do.
Mhm.
Because we don't get enough of that. We've got people that are ready to cut you down, especially on social media,
Oh my
especially
god.
on in the industries that we're both in. There's
Yeah.
somebody ready to critique you, ready to cut you down, ready to chop down that tall poppy, and put you in your place type thing. And so that's amazing. And so you retired him. So what was that? What were you doing when you were able to do that for him?
Oh, social media management
Okay.
specifically and only. So I had less than 8 clients and I was doing, I want to say 160, 170, if not 190. per year run rate. So
Yeah.
it grew very quickly. I was surprised by how many people needed someone to do the thing versus just like teach a course on the thing, you know?
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, social media management specifically, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you finding more and more
Mhm.
people are like that? They'll rather put money into things than time, and they'd rather hire and have people help them with stuff like, because social media training and learning how to do it, I would imagine a
Mhm.
lot of that is readily
Mhm.
available, but people are just not willing to do it. They'd rather find somebody that's well versed in it and able to help them out. And is that kind of what grew your business? Is those people?
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think even to this day, like I experience this too. Sometimes I'm just like, I am information overloaded. Stop.
Yeah.
Don't teach
Yeah.
me anything else. I want to know, like, can you do this for me? Can you make this happen? Because I'm tired. And so are other CEOs, they want someone
Right.
to come
Right.
in and just like implement everything. And actually, this has been surprising. Like one of the biggest things we've seen with like Polynora is most clients come to us for a strategy and we deliver the whole strategy. And they're like, okay, now how much for you to do it? Because
Yeah.
we're tired.
Yeah.
Our team is exhausted. They're overloaded. Like, could you please just come in and do it? And that's actually been an amazing strategy for us. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you get to that place where you were doing what you're doing now? Like you
Hmm.
started with the social, you said you kind of
Yeah.
wavered on whether you wanted to do that. What happened during that time?
Ooh. So I did a lot of client work for probably a lot longer than most people stick with it. I'm just going to be super honest.
Yeah.
Like, I did social media, I did Facebook ads, I went into like full on implementation of launches. And I'll just be super honest, it like kicked my butt. Like,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
so much work. And yeah, we brought client after client after client through multi-million dollar launches. And I was just like, dude, I am tired. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I can do this
Yeah.
anymore. And so it it's been this love-hate relationship of like going back and forth between doing it, advising on it, doing it, advising
Right.
on it. Cause
Right.
I don't know, I think you hit a point where you're like, I just dude, I need a break sometimes. Or you
Yeah.
have one really rough client where they just get you to that point where you're like, I don't want to do any part of this anymore, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
just
Right.
being honest, I've had
Right. Right.
clients, you know? Yeah. So I almost feel like I constantly go back and forth between wanting to offer it and like not wanting to offer it at all ever again.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there is something beautiful about done for you, whether it's done for you like brand voice, brand archetype. I do love copywriting. So I
Hmm.
go back to copywriting a lot. People don't actually, I think, know that about me. I do a lot of copywriting for clients, whether it's
Yeah.
captions or emails or sales pages. Like process. So I'll
Yeah.
get in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that what
Hmm.
reignited your love? Because you said you started off doing social, you grew that, you're able to retire your
Yeah.
husband, and you grew that, and you got the
Hmm.
commas, you got all that stuff. It's kind of like saying, I love to cook, but I don't want to own a restaurant, and so you loved
Yeah.
doing it at first, and then
Yeah.
you grew it to a place where it became too much. Is that what happened? And then you kind of paused and then reset. How did you reset? Like, what was that like?
Let me actually go back to what caused the first big pause. So we grew to $86,000 months, which was fantastic. We didn't have that much team in place. And that was just on the agency side, that didn't include education. So things were growing fast. And I was actually in Jamaica on my first real vacation in years. Let's see. So that was 2018. Yeah. Yeah, 2018. That's so wild. And I was like so excited because I had not had a real vacation.
There you
So,
go. There you go.
um, first vacation ever. My husband and I are focusing on our marriage in Jamaica. Kind of like a reset, reconnect, all of the above. After three kids, we're tired, right?
Yeah.
Um, And our business partner was like, yeah, I've got you on this vacation. I'm so happy. Have fun, enjoy the trip. And halfway through the vacation, he messages me and says, I'm so sorry, but I'm leaving, effective immediately.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what is happening? Because I wasn't messaging at all. I was checking to make sure there weren't any fires or anything. But he's like, I'm leaving, and I'm leaving for the mentor that we hired. And
Oh,
I
wow.
was just, yeah, I was gobsmacked. Like, isn't that very Australian? Gobsmacked?
Yeah, I love that word.
I think so. So, but it was one of those moments where it's like, I'm not going to sleep tonight because I
Wow.
don't know what is happening, what's going on. I was truly blindsided, and so was Paul. And I mean, he got on the phone with the business partner. He's like, what's actually happening? Just tell me the truth. And for the longest time, he like denied that he was going to go work for our mentor who had poached him. And this was one of the most
Wow.
dramatic things I've experienced in business because I just didn't know that level of like deception even existed, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It was like a
just
reality
tell the
check
truth,
of,
just be
wow.
honest. Yeah. Yeah, don't steal your clients, team members. I was actually just blown away by that. And so that was that was tough. On that trip, I had to fire all of our clients but 5 to get us back down to like 30,000 because I knew I could handle 30,000 a month in MRR. And I was like, this is pretty traumatic. So that was one of those moments that really pulled away a lot of my love for working with clients. Just knowing if you don't have the right team and team that you can trust,
Yeah.
it can mess you up for 6 months, and leave
Yeah.
you beyond exhausted and stressed. It was like suddenly becoming a single mom of 6 kids or whatever,
Right.
like
Right. Right.
that
Right.
was
Yeah. Quite the head
that
smack moment.
messed
Yeah.
with me all. Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
so
I
what
would
was
say
the
that
learning?
was
Like,
kind of the moment that like pulled me away from it. And the learning. Um One of the biggest learnings I had through that was really check in with people and read between the lines. So when you say like, how are you doing? And they're like, I'm good. Be like what? What parts
yeah.
of your life are good? And
Yeah.
what's not going well? And how do you actually feel about things? And like ask them questions that kind of go deeper because most people love to kind of pretend that everything's fine until it's not,
Right. Right.
but they still go further and not until it's not. Yeah. So that was big. And then falling back into love with it. I will say I love growing clients' businesses kind of more than I even love growing my own, which is kind of toxic
Yeah. Yeah.
for all of us. But there is something so fun about, yeah, kicking off like an incredible launch for a client and then
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
like, I didn't know this was actually possible. I've seen it for other people. And just like, there's something so beautiful about seeing a client like hit their first viral. And I'm like, oh, isn't this addicting? Like, yes, let's keep
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
So I, so as I like tiptoed back into client work, I was just like, there's something about this that is kind of dangerously addictive, and I love it. I kind of really
Yeah.
love it.
Well, and it's that whole thing
Mhm.
of the cobbler's children have no shoes, and I think most businesses are
Yeah.
like that. The very thing that they help others with, they're not helping themselves with.
Yep.
And because it's just, it seems more sometimes tedious, sometimes not as fun, but then being able to serve
Yep.
people and get them results and get them uh,
Yep.
doing the things that they want to do and hitting their goals and reaching their purpose just makes it's thrilling to, and especially if you're wired to help
Yep.
people, if you love helping people, sometimes you put yourself second. And it sounds like that's what
Mhm.
was happening with some of what you were doing. And that's what drew you back, is being able to help people and get
Mhm.
them to that place. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing now. I know you've done some amazing video work. You've your
Yeah.
social work. So tell me a little bit about Pellinora.
Man, okay. So one of the big changes that we experienced this year was we actually intentionally laid off the majority of our team. And that was a huge decision. And that was kind of a part of the process of being like, do we still want to do this?
Yeah.
What is life going to look like? Are we a solopreneurship? Do we take on less responsibility? Like, there was a time, Paul, where our overhead just to keep the lights on was $80,000 per month.
Wow.
And I remember when that was the case, and I was just like, people would think like, oh, she shows up because she loves money. I'm like, I actually don't love money at all. I couldn't care less.
Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
I love books. I love musicals. I love sewing. But it was like I had to show up a certain way just to fund our team. And that was like a really harsh reality. And so as we went through that, I was like, I think we need to intentionally scale back to give me some room to kind of imagine and be able to create new thoughts and new products. And so we did, and it was really hard,
Yeah.
really, really, really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
And one of the most difficult conversations was with Anna Olson, who is one of my best friends. And I actually didn't have the conversation. I, like, sat in the bathtub and, like, cried, while Paul went over to their house and let her know, because I was like, "I
Yeah.
can't do this, I can't do this." And
Yeah. Wow.
funny story, she actually called me mid-bath, yeah, and she's like, I was so scared, and I kept denying her calls because I was like, I can't handle this, it's too much, I can't believe we just let you go." And,
Yeah. Yeah.
so she's like, "Pick up the phone, stupid. It's about a dog." And I was like, "What?" So I answered her next call. And she's like, "There are these dogs, and we could have brother dogs. Do you want to have brother dogs?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And
Yeah.
I felt like that was something so beautiful because it just showed me like there is hope after this. Because, dude, that
Right.
sucked. That sucked so bad. Just being like,
Right.
goodbye to everyone.
Yeah.
And then, so Anna, we had this big conversation about like her stepping into the role of CEO of Pellinora, this consulting company that we started. We started it about a year ago, but we didn't get serious until 6 months ago. And I, I'll be super honest, I didn't expect her to take it seriously. And I didn't expect her to step in fully because that was just my past experience with people. Once
Yeah.
you let them go from the known and the, paid position, they kind of give up. And so when I saw how Anna stepped in, it kind of blew my mind. It was actually shocking. And so I'll share this. I haven't shared this publicly anywhere yet. So in the last 6 months, we went from 0 to 500,000 run rate. So
Wow.
it's
Wow.
thriving under her leadership.
Did she
So
tell you why?
Pellinora was,
Did she tell you why she stepped in like that?
oh, that's such a good question. I think there were 2 things. She hasn't told me directly, but I could call her after this and find out for sure. So, um, 2 things. One, I think she was at a place where she was like, "I'm sick of being an employee for people. I want to own. I wanna be an owner. I want
Yeah.
things to happen." And last Christmas, we actually had this, like, sit down. I also haven't told anyone this either. So we sat down with like a whiteboard at Christmas, and it was us two, our 2 husbands, because the 4 of us are just besties. And we talked about how most of the greats had like a team that they could rely on no matter what. Like they
Yeah.
all had each
Yeah.
other's backs, and they would, if one was tired or sick or whatever, the other would step in. And so we built out an entire plan to just for funsies, a billion.
Yeah.
And we were like, we're going to call this like the syndicate. Like, we'll have your kids' backs. You guys have our kids' backs forever. And
Wow.
I'll just be super honest. So deep down, I'm a skeptic and I don't believe people until push comes to shove. So even though we made that commitment, I was like, I don't know. I'll see. I'll see in
Right.
time if
Right.
you
Wait and
you
see.
really
Yeah.
meant it. Yeah. So she meant it. So she wanted to be an owner. She wanted to grow something. She was sick and tired of the whole being pushed around kind of thing. And the second thing too, so you know how there are some people who just have insane amounts of like vision and creativity and they aren't able to be on every day perfectly, right? Like they have off
Right. Right.
days, they have days
Right.
sick or whatever. Yeah. So she was looking for that. She was looking for someone who could show up and be like, I'm going to cast the vision. I'm going to share the strategy. I'm going to give you guidance, but I'm not going to be the implementer. She was
Right.
literally kind of looking for that and didn't know. And so, yeah, so she
Wow.
appreciates how I show up as a visionary. And Eleanor has been freaking awesome. Like seeing how our clients are growing is so cool. And
Yeah.
it's everything from marketing to operations. So it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think those kind of partnerships are gold because,
Mm-hmm.
there are the unicorns
Mm-hmm.
that are the visionary, creative thinking, ideas person, and that are also good at executing them and making them happen. I think those are unicorns. What happens more often than not is there's the creative person who's got 1,000 ideas a minute. Ideas just pop in their head all the time, and they're great
Yep.
ideas, and they're $1 million ideas, and that's kind of what Headsmack's about. Is taking an idea and actually executing it. Is taking that Headsmack moment, from somebody that
Yeah.
shares something and actually putting it into action. But for a lot of us, we
Yep.
struggle with that, especially those that are creative thinkers. And so partnering with somebody that is an executor that makes it happen is priceless, because we can all say I've had a million ideas and I actually saw somebody implement an idea that I once had, but I never did anything with it. But finding somebody to take those ideas and then execute on them is so valuable. And it sounds like that's what you found is somebody to be the person that executes and makes it happen.
Yes. Yeah, I will say, like, so I can execute, but it is so draining for me. Like,
Right.
so draining to the point where, like, for 2 days after, I can't function. I,
Yeah.
like, wanna lay in bed all day. So I just work
Right.
from bed, watching TV
Yeah.
shows or whatever.
Right.
But,
Right.
I needed that person in my life, and I still am actually kinda like, pinch me. Is this for real? Is this really happening? Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
far, yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty
well, and I
cool.
think I think that's the thing is what's easy for you is genius for somebody else. And so,
Mhm.
for you, the creativity and idea generation is easy. And for her, it's like, oh man,
Mhm.
that's genius. But to you, it's like, I
Mhm.
I do this easily. Like any, that it happens for me easy. And then for her, probably the execution, making things happen comes a lot
Yep.
easier. It's not impossible for you, and it's not impossible for
Yeah.
creative thinkers to execute as well. It's just it's work for them. It's
Yeah.
harder for them. They could do it, but it's just a little harder for them. And so
Yeah.
I think that's pretty powerful as well. Is finding that person that's this
Mhm.
genius zone. They can do the other stuff, but they just thrive in that thing. And I
Yep.
found for me even there are things that if I work really, 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 really hard at, I can get average at
Mhm.
it. But there are other things that if I
I
just give it
love that.
there are some other things that if I just give it some time, I can like really be good at it, and I can really
Yep.
thrive at it. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck is they work on the stuff that if they work really hard at it, they can get average. And I
Oh,
think that distracts them.
that right there is like a whole truth bomb. Take on, that's good. I like that.
So tell us with
Hmm.
what you guys are now doing. So you've got this great partnership, you've got the syndicate, you guys are ready to conquer the world. How are you conquering the
Mhm.
world? What are you doing to help people themselves get unstuck and realizing that they need
Yep.
somebody to take them to the next level. What are you guys doing?
Oh man. Okay, so a lot of our marketing still comes from my brand because it's established, it's there, it's ready. I mean, last year organically we reached minus like four big platforms, 105 million people, which is kind of mind
Wow.
blowing. Okay, so on my platforms alone last year, I reached 105 million people. And that doesn't include my Facebook profile, which reaches 20 million plus. I don't know. It's crazy. And then
Wow.
a few other
Wow.
platforms like our blog, our podcast, any of the above. And so we use that a lot for our marketing and it works really well. I was actually surprised
Yeah.
because the rapport is there, the social proof is there, the know, like, and trust. Um, and then with Pelanora, we are first and foremost working with people from the foundations. And you'd be surprised, well, maybe you wouldn't, by how many people don't know like what their brand archetype or the four levels of brand archetype are. Like you have your
Yeah.
persona, it's the outward facing and the shadow and all of that. And I feel like so many clients come to us and they're like, we want to be like Alex Hermosi. And I'm like, cute. You're
Right.
nothing
Right.
like him. It's never going to work. Like, no, let's do the brand archetype exercise and let's get your brand voice. And the brand voice, we've got this internal IP that is, it's 87 total questions with 3 sub points for each. So it's a total of like what,
Wow.
260 something points. And it's everything from how do you use transitions to how do you bridge things to how do you format your segments, rotations, what types of humor do you use? Did you know there's like 100+ versions of humor? Like we break it all down
Wow. Really?
because, yeah. So I use sarcasm rarely because I don't understand it most of the time. So when people are sarcastic, I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't tell. Are you joking? So once we realized like that was a huge part of how someone comes across and why most people who hire copywriters are disappointed. We're like, let's break this down into something big. And then we almost
Yeah.
always do like it's not pretty, but it's a rebrand. We'll double check like the colors. Do they align with your brand voice, your brand archetype, etc. And so we start with that and we do that fast. Like it is rapid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like,
So talk to me about the archetypes.
yeah.
For somebody that might not have heard that term before,
Oh yeah.
what do you mean by archetypes?
Oh, I love this. So Carl Jung is a genius, in my opinion. Well, in many people's opinions, but Carl Jung, he created a few super monumental frameworks for A, brand archetypes, and B, human inner internal cognitive functions. So, in the brand archetypes, there are 12 total, and it's everything from the guru to the caregiver to the everyman or everywoman, the jester. And
Hmm.
there's 12, and each one represents kind of like how you show up. Now, when you go into the 4 layers, there's the persona. So, this is how people perceive you, like the way you show up. And that
Yeah.
can sometimes be very different from our inner worlds, which I think is so fascinating because we get into psych here.
Yeah.
Um, we all also have a shadow, and our shadow probably sneaks in, creeps in, all of the above. Like I know for a fact my shadow is the jester. So I'm actually super goofy and kind of just like a screw off like all the time. And so that creeps in. And if you're not
Yeah.
careful to intentionally weave it in, people are left thinking like, why did this version of this person or this brand seem so off? And so you have to be careful about how you
Yeah.
weave in the shadow, which I love. Um, so yeah, so we dive into that. Also, side note, everyone should look up not Myers-Briggs, but the cognitive functions that it's based on, because it is next level nerd out. So with brand archetypes, it determines everything from like the colors you should be using to make sense for who you are, how your brand shows up, whether it's a personal brand or a business, to
Yeah.
even things like the types of humor you use. For example, if I am overly uh, deprecating or overly like kind of clapback mode, it
Hmm.
doesn't come across well. People are like, wait, I thought you were like the caregiver. I thought you were like here to like
Right,
snuggle
right.
me and tell me everything was going to be fine. So we help our clients a lot with this. And I've loved it. Like seeing the transformation and how they show up. We had one client who came to us and she said, I want to roll out like a super, I got to be careful not to reveal her industry. A super luxury brand. And we were like, you are the every woman and the caregiver. This is a no. Your audience will
Wow.
revolt if you share $100 aprons. Like, it's not going to work. And like that saved her brand because otherwise she was going to go down
Right.
a path. Yeah, it was crazy. So I love brand archetypes and I love Carl Jung. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
Jung for anyone wondering.
So when it comes to
Hmm.
person, the shadow version of you, when do you use that? When is that appropriate to reveal?
It depends on the person, it depends on their, like, primary persona, etcetera. For me, I do it, like, tongue in cheek. So I, like, intentionally will be like, "Haha, just kidding," or I'll be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm just in a silly mood today." But, yeah, for most brands, you have to be careful as to when you weave it in, because the shadow is
Yeah.
the worst parts of us and the thing that contradicts most of the time who we show up as. So I show up as this like caregiver, but at home with my friends, I'm kind of a
Yeah.
jerk sometimes because I'm a goofball. Like I am making
Yeah.
jokes
Yeah.
about everything. I rail on every situation. And so if I did that in my public persona, people would just be like, I feel so confused and conflicted about who you are, you know? And I still do once in a while. And I actually get in trouble a lot for it. So
Yeah. So even with the public persona,
mhm.
how much of that needs to be real and how much of that is possibly an alter ego?
Are we really going there?
We are.
Oh
Let's do
man.
it.
Oh man. Okay. Um Oof. This one's tough, Paul. Okay, so when you start your business, you have to make a decision, especially if you're going to be a personal brand where you're the face. Do I want to craft a persona that feels sustainable? And that is huge, huge, huge key. Or
Right.
do I want to show up as myself? Now, do you remember when Jim Carrey did that documentary where he was talking about
Yeah.
like, yeah, if you create an alter ego, you have to decide, am I going to live as this alter ego or am I going to be lowered into the grave as this alter ego? Now, there was some wisdom to
Right.
that, but I also want to bring another perspective because the more you grow, you will be crucified either way,
Yeah.
100 times out of 100. Like people are mean online, just going to be super honest. So, my
Yeah.
big thought is do I want to allow other people to crucify who I really am? Or do I want to have like one layer of separation that kind of protects me a little bit? And I am a fan of the latter and all that that entails. Feel free to ask more if you want.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Good.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, did you ever watch the show Grey's Anatomy?
Occasionally, yeah.
Okay, so do you happen to remember Lexi Gray?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, anyone listening will know who I'm talking about who watches Grey's. So, at my core, I am probably one of the biggest like sweethearts. My friends usually describe me as like the sweetheart of the group, sweetheart but jester, you know. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I'm super sensitive. I am emotional. I don't have a thick skin at all. Um, and really it's almost like naive or pure. Either way, whatever.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So, how I've chosen to add one layer of separation with how I show up online is I went to caregiver. So, it's caregiver kind of every woman. So it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to show up. I'm going to support you. I'm going to encourage you, all of the above. And just that little bit of a layer of separation has allowed me to not feel like I am personally getting roasted every time I show up online.
Right.
And for the most part, it's
Right.
actually really helped. So I'm a fan, huge fan of alter egos. Just the biggest thing is you don't want to have an alter ego that is super different to who you are, or else you just feel like
Right.
you're masquerading all the time. Mhm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would call the alter ego an augmentation of a portion
Ooh,
of you or a version of you,
yes.
because it is because then it becomes a mask as opposed
Yeah.
to just a version of you that's just augmented. It's because even for me, like I
Yeah.
one of the things I wrestle with social media is putting myself out there and putting my face out there, and
Mhm.
because in reality, I'm just kind of a quiet person. I just like to keep to myself. I like to
Really?
just chill with my family. Yeah.
Uh,
And so for me, my alter ego is this version of me being in front
yeah.
of the camera. It's me posting photos of my fat head on social media. It's me, that's
Yeah.
that's the side of me that is my alter
Yeah.
ego. It's when I step on stage to speak, that's a augmented version of the real me. I mean, my family
Mm,
sees the joking, fun, storytelling side of me at one version, but on stage I'm a different version, an augmented version of
mhm.
that. And so I think you're right in that is if you choose a archetype as a brand, if you
Mhm.
choose an alter ego as a brand, if you're too far removed from that, then sustaining it is going to lead to frustration and pain. Even with, you mentioned Jim Carrey, he said Jim Carrey was a character.
Yes.
That was not Jim Carrey. It was a character he played.
And he burned out.
And yeah, yeah, he just
Yeah.
realized that every time people meet me, they expect me to be on.
Yeah.
They expect me to be the goofy, stretchy face, joking type person. And that got exhausting. And I think that's because he was so far removed of who he actually was. And so,
I think
even with what you were saying, I think that's very true.
yeah. Um, when I am in the zone as mom, so I'm pretty quiet. Like I'm supporting character, hands down. I remember like when my daughter was in her school musical and I sewed both of her dresses. I was so proud of them because they were like Broadway quality. Like I took on a project I had no business taking on with those. And I just went for it. And I was like, I'm gonna figure it out. And it made me go a little crazy for a little bit, but that's fine. And I remember when opening night happened, I was in the locker room where all the girls were getting dressed, and they didn't have someone manning the locker room. And that kind of frustrated me because I was like, these girls need help. They need help with zippers, they need help with buttons that just fell off. So I ended up staying in the locker room for the whole opening night. And I did that for 4 out of the 5 performances. And I remember feeling as alive as if I had been on stage. I loved that. I loved that backstage
Yeah.
role. So as a
Yeah.
mom, and I think as a person, I'm a lot more low key. I like to kind of play backstage and not have to think too much about all of the moving pieces. And yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And I think there are some people that
mhm,
are wired to be second fiddles.
yes,
They're wired to support the person that maybe is out there, and they get
yeah,
just as fulfilled. And
yes,
people that are not at that place, that are not like that, they don't understand how come you don't want to be that person up front, the one getting the accolades, the one doing all of that. And it's like, I actually love supporting those who do that, and I get as fulfilled doing that as if it was me up there, or if I was
yeah,
the one doing the thing. And it sounds like that's what happened to you. And
yeah,
so, when it comes to working with the personas, working with the
mhm.
archetypes, um, what are some other things that people need to consider and also be wary of?
Ooh. We actually go one step removed on this one.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go to another Jungian philosophy, which is the internal cognitive functions. So a lot of people know of like Myers-Briggs, MBTI, which is the 4 letters, right? We all have 4 letters that are
Right.
assigned to us that determine who we are and how we show up.
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs is actually just pulled from Carl Jung's cognitive functions and his Myers-Briggs, the 4-letter kind of archetypes in and of their own right. So this blew my mind. I'm so excited I get to share this with you. Good question, by the way.
Yeah.
So we all have 4 internal cognitive functions, and they're in a set order based on who you are and how you test. And this actually blew my mind. I'll have to look mine up because I don't have it memorized. This is one of the craziest things ever. So cognitive function stacks. All right, I'm going to pull this up because it's so good. Basically,
Good.
we all have what's called like our loops, okay? So we have our primary or our dominant, we have our secondary or auxiliary, we have our tertiary, and we have the fourth, which is our least developed. Now, they all sound like they all sound like a Sound of Music song or something. So I have like Nifetise, ni, fe, ti, se. And what
It
blows
does
my
sound like
mind,
Sound of Music.
I know, doesn't it? Like doe, a deer. So what's wild about this is we all have these loops where essentially your first, your second, and your third can put you into this like sense of being stuck. So you
Yeah.
might get into a sense of being stuck where it comes to like internal thinking, like that's TI, right? Or yeah, TI. And because you're thinking internally, you're not vocalizing things. You're not expressing them to others. You're not connecting. You're like kind of shutting down a little bit. And then let's say we go to intuitive internal, and that's your tertiary. Intuitive internal or introverted is going to have you start to remember moments that feel the same. Oh, intuitively, I remember that moment that felt the same.
Hmm.
This was similar. Oh, I did mess up in that way. Oh, that's really embarrassing. Remember that time when? And that further like feeds your TI, which then feeds your NI, which feeds your TI. And so you get stuck into these loops. And every single person who's listening to this should look this up for your own MBTI type, because the thing that usually breaks us out of these like stuckness moments is the thing that we avoid. Ooh.
Hmm.
So, for
Wow.
example, yeah. So I get really shut down. I don't know if you feel that way. Like I get shut down. I want to be alone. I don't want to see anyone when I'm stuck. I'm like, no, it's alone, alone, alone. I'm not out there like partying. I'm like
Right.
by
Right.
myself. Like, how else am I messing up? This is fantastic everywhere. Okay, cool. And then the thing that would actually break me out of it is either like tactile experiences. So sewing something with a lot of different fabrics, feeling something, gardening.
Right.
Gardening is a
Wow.
big one for me. Or getting out there and having these feeling moments with people. So meeting up with people I love and adore and talking. Oh, it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
hard when you're stuck. So I think this
Yeah.
plays
Yeah.
in big, yeah, into how you choose to show up in your persona. So for example, if I were to pick the outlaw, I already know it would kill me as my brand archetypes. Well, on so many
Yeah.
levels. But if I were to pick the outlaw, it would mean that I would be knowingly pissing people off, which would kick me into my cognitive loop. And all the
Right.
time,
Right.
I would be wrestling with that naturally. So I think about those things
That
and I
is
think
so
they're kind of
good.
cool. Yeah, thanks. It's not mine, it's Young's.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and like you were talking about, if you choose the
Mhm.
outlaw, and you're not a person that likes conflict, or you don't like to debate, or you don't like when people hate you or don't like you, then
Yeah.
you're going to constantly be in this frustration of, I want to be the outlaw. I want to be, I want to push against everybody else, and I want to
Mhm.
stir up trouble. And it's like, yeah, but the people are going to push back, and people are going
Yeah.
to, not like you. Are you okay with that? And for some people, they're like, yeah, totally, I'm fine with that. But if you're not, then you need to rethink it, because as we talked about, the personas, the archetypes are best when they're an augmentation of a part of you, as
Yeah.
opposed to a totally fake character, because that'll wear you out, and that'll send you into spirals of depression or
Yes.
frustration or whatever,
Mhm.
because it's not who you are, it's not how you're wired to be. And then you have to relook at what, am I getting frustrated because I'm trying to be what the cool people online are? They say do
Mhm.
this online, or act this way, or behave this way, or stir up trouble on social media because it gets attention. And you're like, and if that's not you, then suddenly you're like, people are hating on me, people don't like me, because you've tried to be a person that you're not. And so I love that you're talking about that with your clients, is finding that authentic self and finding ways to augment that, but not become a
Yeah.
fake version of you.
Yep. I think that's honestly huge. Yeah, if I were to try to be, I don't know if you know like Dan Henry. We've been
Yeah,
buddies
yeah,
for years. He's so funny.
yeah,
Um, so he's very much so the outlaw, like no question.
right.
And it gets him into a lot of trouble. And most of the time he can handle it, right? Like he does halfway decently with it. He was raised by a shock jock father. And so, but I look at that and I'm like, dude, I make one post that's like just a little bit taken wrong. And I can't handle it. And there is
Yeah,
no way I could build a sustainable company with that.
right,
No way.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I even found that too. I was posting stuff that was pushing people's buttons, because
Yep.
there is that side of me that likes doing that. I hate to admit it, but but I'm not a debater. Like, I'm not an arguer, and I'm not a debater. I just have very, very rebellious thoughts. I have very opinionated thoughts, but it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that I want to argue about it. It's just, and so I probably need to journal more than I need to social media.
I love that you said that because just the other day, so I posted something very contrarian and I was like, I was pissed off about something. And I was like, you know what? Meh, 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 meh. I'm going to subtweet this.
Yeah.
And I posted it on my Facebook profile, which I think sometimes I forget has like 400,000 followers. And so I posted it and people I loved and adored were like, Rachel, why would you post this? This is so hurtful. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is about like one specific situation. And I commented back and I said, no, it's just a subtweet, but I probably should get a journal. I said that. So funny.
So yeah, and that's, and I think that goes back to what we're
Mhm.
saying, is
Yes.
be the real you,
Yeah.
and recognize when things are out of character. And
Yep.
you talked about perception, so talk a little bit about perception and managing perception as well, because that's more important, because perception is greater than reality for some people, because what
Yeah.
they perceive and what is real isn't always the same thing.
I would actually say most people, kind of like even people who are more educated or brilliant included. We all kind of, whether we mean to or not, believe the perception that's put out there for us. And so it's interesting because it affects everything from um, how I show up with my husband, Paul. If it was up to Paul, he would never be online, not even once. Like, he is
Yeah, my wife's
so
the same way.
private. Yes. He is so private. And then it was probably, let's see, 5 or 6 years ago, we hired a business coach who is brilliant. And he shared, listen, every time that you guys go a few months without posting about your marriage, people assume you're on the rocks. And we were like, that's the
Wow.
dumbest thing we've ever heard. Like, that's so stupid.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
actually true. And now, so I'll be super honest. Like, I am someone who is very, very lazy with my physical appearance. Like, most of the time, I look like a hot mess. My hair is like greasy. I have bad skin. I just wear whatever shirt I got on Amazon. I don't care. And it was actually Anna, my business partner, who said, Rachel, you need to show up at least some type of standard, because otherwise people assume that you're struggling and you're like mentally not all there. And I love you. And she said it completely with love, and it was welcomed. She's like,
Yeah.
respectfully, bestie, you need to glow up. And I was like, oh. So I've been slowly working on it ever since then. I just don't care, because I don't like see how that makes a difference in who we are at all. Like, I straight up
Right.
believe, a present wrapped with a Target bag and a present wrapped with gorgeous luxury paper are the same, if they're the same thing
Right.
inside. But that's not how the
Yeah.
world sees things. And so even things like
No.
how my background looks matter. Like, people want to see,
Right.
like, is this a beautiful, organized, united front? Can I trust this person? And that does matter
Yeah.
to them. Is it the dumbest thing
Right.
ever? Sure. But we all fall for it. So,
Yeah.
but
Well, and we say
yeah,
we don't
perception.
judge books by their cover, but we absolutely do.
We do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I actually have a book. I don't know where it is. I'm not going to be able to find it. So it's a book where it is the one of the best books I read at the time that I read it. It was really new for me, like the concept of like wealth consciousness and stepping into believing like you can make more money and that money is just an energetic transfer. And that was super radical to me when I read it. And the cover is so hideous, Paul. It is disgusting, and
Yeah.
the title is awful. The book, I'll call it out. It's Happy Pocket Full of Money. The title is
Hmm.
stupid. The cover is hideous. Like, I resisted
Yeah.
that book with everything I have, and it ended up being like one of the most pivotal books I've ever read. So,
Yeah.
but we do judge books by their cover. Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Well, and maybe
Mhm.
we judge books by their content, but we're attracted to them by their cover, or where they
Ooh.
get our attention by their
Mhm.
cover. But we judge them by their content ultimately, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
great books with ugly covers, but
Yep.
initially, unless people know about it, unless there's a reputation and all of that other
Yep.
stuff that's to do with branding, your word of mouth, all of that stuff, that we do. We'll make
Mhm.
a decision based on what we see, whether it's worth not, looking at or not. But ultimately, we judge it by its content, and whether it's worthwhile
Okay.
reading and sharing and telling others about it. And so,
Yeah.
when it comes to helping businesses with what you're doing now, we've
Yeah.
talked about the personas, we've talked about
Yep.
archetypes. What are some other things that for a business owner or for somebody that's trying to make an impact online, that would be a head smack for them to consider that maybe they
Mm.
hadn't thought about before?
Huge, huge, huge thing here. More business owners need to compile archives of their IP, meaning videos of you talking about what makes you different. Whether it's educational videos, webinars, training videos, coaching videos. The number of times that I talk to someone for Pelanora and they're like, we want to hire you. We want basically to have like a team be able to handle all of our content. And I'm like, that's great. How many hours of archives of content do you have? Like blogs, lead magnets, emails. And they're like, we don't have any of that. We don't have any videos. And I'm like,
Wow.
there's nothing to extract from. One of our favorite processes, and this is super fun, is quote extraction. So we find original quotes from business owners and then clean them up and make them prettier, like more standalone truth bombs, etc. And then we also do what's called IP extraction. So we create these like roundups. Each one has 10 points in it. You've actually probably seen like my posts where it's like it's a post and there's like gold and stuff, but then there's like 10 specific like these are the steps to take, and then a little more
Yeah.
gold
Yeah.
after it.
Yeah.
those are all just my IP extractions. I don't have to rewrite them every time. So we do these for clients all the time. But if you don't have anything documented, there's nothing to work from. So you better be ready to like sit and write
Mm.
and record. Um, one of my favorite things about my business is that I have thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of me speaking about my IP in many different areas. So I can easily
Yeah.
extract anything I want, which is kind of cool. But yeah, make sure this is also a big thing. So once in a while, I hate when this happens, but it does happen. We'll encounter a client and I'll say, like, okay, so could you give me this type of video recorded? And they'll send me back a video and it's like, here are 10 things you should do to raise your prices. And they're like, believe in yourself. Number 2, charge more. And I'm like, you gave us nothing. This was
Yeah.
nothing. We can't work with this. You have to have something that is actually a mechanism that impacts people. So make sure there are like deliverables in the things that you're sharing as you document and archive your content.
So give me an example of that for somebody that just heard what
Mhm.
you said and it's like, yeah, I totally have done the wrong thing. What would be an example of just
Okay.
something
Um,
that I should right thing?
okay, so here's an example. Like, okay, so let's actually use the same one. If I were to record a 15-minute YouTube video, and that's the start of the archive, right? Of video content, how to charge more. So I'd be like, step 1, you're going to create a 3-tier proposal, meaning there are 3 options for your prices. There's uh low to medium, there's a medium to high, and then there's like the whole enchilada. Step 2, you absolutely are going to want to send your proposals in line order format, meaning in the email copy, so that your clients can quickly make a decision and respond line item instead of having to download a proposal, a PDF, and then trying to track it down in their million downloads. All right, step number
Yeah.
3, you're going to basically create your top tier ticket item based on every single thing that they mentioned in their discovery call that they ever possibly dreamed of. That's what we call the whole enchilada. Do not offer that at your low ticket price because you don't want to do all that work for that price. Trust me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay, so does that make sense? It's like it's specific,
Yeah.
it's actionable, etc. So as you're going through, ask yourself, could someone pull out a notebook and actually take notes on this process? And if the answer is no, rethink it. So I think that helps a lot.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. And so with the folks that you help,
Yeah,
what are some of the other mindsets or some of the other head smacks that you need to give them to set them on the right track? You mentioned,
yeah.
collecting, archiving, content,
Mhm.
ideas, IP. What are some other things that they need to consider that you go in
Yeah.
there and challenge them with and help them with?
One of the biggest ones is the so what test. This one is one where when I go in, if they've either been managing their own social or working with their team to manage social, and they're like, I don't know, we're putting out tons of content, it doesn't seem to be working. I go, okay, do I have permission for a minute to give you just like serious tough love because this is going to be tough? And I wait until they say yes, always, because otherwise, um, it's not taken well. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
say none of your content passes the so what test. If I were a stranger, I find your profile or your content, I would literally scroll past it so fast because I would be like, so what? So what? What does this mean for me? Nothing.
Yeah.
And I would just scroll right past. So that's a big one. That's, I think, a huge head smack moment. Because, by the way, I have to do this for myself too. Because sometimes I'll post content and I'm like, this is brilliant. And then nothing happens. So I'm
Yeah.
like, take on it. It didn't pass the so what test. Nobody cares. I care, but they
Yeah.
don't. Shoot.
So how do they fix the so what? Like, so how do they write better? How do they create better
Mhm.
content to pass the so what test?
I love your questions. So, the biggest thing you go back to is extracting your client's actual pain points. And I'm not talking pain points like, I want to do better. I want life to be more smooth. No, like you have to find essentially why is your person crying? Because they're crying about something. They're crying
Wow.
because their skin has been rough since they've been in perimenopause. They're crying because they used to be hot and now they're not, and they're sad and they don't know how to get it back. Your client is crying because they used to hit, $50,000 months, and lately they've been at like 12,000, and they can barely make payroll, and they're covering their payroll from their personal savings account. So when I do pain point extraction, when I do this process, by the way, it's not cool. It's like detective style. So I go into
Yeah,
Facebook.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll create fake Facebook profiles and go into Facebook groups to find the words in their exact target markets, how they phrase it, and then I compile it all into massive documents and then extract the common themes. And I don't think this is done enough. Why is your person
Right.
actually crying? Because everyone cries.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you said about going into the Facebook groups and extracting the actual language, because
Yes.
I think sometimes we can get, it used to be called corp speak. We get into this
Yeah.
language that totally makes sense to us, totally
Yeah.
is using the words and the phrasing, how we talk about the problem,
Yeah.
how, how we phrase the problem, how we articulate it. But asking the question of how is your ideal client or how is your
Yeah.
ideal customer, how do they talk about that problem? Like when
Mhm.
they are laying awake at night, when they're
Yep.
crying, when they're feeling the pain, what did they Google for to
Yes.
solve it? What did they ask the question of their therapist to solve it? Like, what's their language that they're using? And until you understand that, you're going to be missing the what if, right? Or so
Yeah.
what? The you're going to be missing that communication because you're not using the same language. You're talking a foreign language with them. Yeah, that's pretty
Absolutely. Like,
powerful.
and one that I share a lot. So, like, I'm good at business and I'm not great at like style or like staying up to date looking. I sometimes I age and sometimes I'm like, oh, I look good. Okay. And that's just hit or miss for me, but it's like an actual pain point. And sometimes I'll see people put like things like how to reverse your aging naturally. And I'm like, no part of me wants that. That doesn't
Yeah.
sound appealing. I want how to glow up in 14 days or less in your 30s or
Right,
in your
right.
40s. That's what I'm searching for probably every night.
Yeah. Well, and the way you phrase that too, like it
Uh-huh.
gives a very clear outcome. It gives a very
Yeah.
clear timeline, which is way
Yes.
more powerful than just what you had mentioned earlier. And so I think that's powerful as well,
Uh-huh.
is given a very clear outcome, very clear timeline is way more
Mhm.
attractive. And that's the language they want to hear, how to get a
Yeah.
beach bod before, summer in 5 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever is way
Yep.
more attractive than how to look better.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. What's a head smack that you want to share that I haven't asked you about?
Oh, what is a head smack I want to share? Okay. For every hour you spend on this is for everyone on YouTube searching up tutorials or advice on marketing, business, all of the above, go spend 5 hours studying psychological effects, frameworks, phenomenons, methods, and all of the above. So once I started doing that and prioritizing studying psychology over like what's on marketing, which is chewed up and spit out psychology, just so you know, it changed everything for me. Like I could go into any business and instantly use the frameworks, the effects, the levers, the methods, etc so much faster instead of being like, well, one time so and so said on a YouTube video or a webinar. It changed the entire process. So go study psychology, human behavioral science.
That's awesome. Well, I see you have quite a collection of books, well organized
Yeah.
behind you by color.
Mhm.
which is kind of weird to me because, as you can see, mine are organized by topic,
Yeah.
because I'd never be able to find anything. But if you had to just grab three books or three ideas, something was happening. It was house fire. It was you were leaving on a vacation and you had to just grab three books and the rest of them you couldn't have access to, or three ideas, what would they be?
Number one, this is super woo-woo, but The Complete Notes from the Universe by Mike Dooley. This book is like my fortune cookie anytime I'm feeling down or out or even just get a little bit lost. Number two, Great Leads by Michael Masterson. It's all about like the psychology of hooks and headlines. Huge fan of it. And number three, ooh, I'm trying to think of ideas now because I'm like, oh, ideas. I like that. That's a good. I've never heard anyone ask about ideas. It's a quote and a methodology. So the quote is, so whenever you think that something is going to take too long, whenever you're like, I can't learn coding, it's going to take me 6 months to even get halfway decent, or my husband can't become a pilot, that's going to take 2 years. It is this quote, the time will pass anyways. And that has shifted the way I think about everything from we've
Wow.
written so many books since I heard that quote. I started learning coding. My husband's about to pass his private pilot license. Like, it's changed everything for me.
Wow, love that. Rachel, this has been amazing, and I'm sure we could talk for a few more hours.
Yours?
You're a
Oh, yeah.
wealth of knowledge and experience, and this
Thank
has
you.
been wonderful, and I've really, really enjoyed it. So if people want to work with you, people are like, okay, I need to get some stuff on track. Who is the person that you can help best, and who is the person that you probably couldn't help?
My favorite people to work with are people who are at least semi-established to established. I need stuff to work with in order to assess what's worked, what hasn't, how to improve things, kind of get our, like our spikes into the mountain together. I don't work well with people who are brand new in any capacity. I don't do well with startups. I've done it many times and I don't do it anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Okay. Speaking of perception, depending on when this launches or goes live, I apologize for the perception of my website. It's hideous. I'm actually super stubborn right now. I'm redesigning my own website because I'm like, I want to do it and it's taking longer than planned. So go to rachelpedersen.com. All E's and a D in my last name. My website is hideous. Yes, I know this. It's fine. It'll be gorgeous soon.
And I'll put a link to that in my show notes as well. And so if people want to get a
Cool.
hold of you, I'll send them over to your website. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome. You asked really good questions.
Thank you for joining us on the Headsmack Podcast. We've shared some candid stories and life-changing ideas. And now it's your time to act. First, take bold action on just one idea and see how your life can radically change. Secondly, whatever platform you're listening to this on, please rate it, share it, and leave a comment. Let us know where this episode impacted you. I appreciate you giving me your time, and don't forget to join us for our next Misfit conversation.